Welcome back to AWS Launchpad at the AWS Summit here in London. We're live on twitch.tv/AWS, and thanks for either sticking with us or just joining us on the stream today. For this next segment, we're going to be taking a little bit of a diversion from our regular AWS topics on the stream, and we're going to be talking to some team members and a customer or partner from another part of Amazon from the Alexa and Amazon Echo team. So I'm delighted to be joined here in London by Max, David, and a long-time friend and partner of AWS, Bob Harris, who's joining us at the end of the desk here on Launchpad this afternoon. So the first thing I want to do is just ask you to introduce yourselves, please. Let's start with Max. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do at AWS, what you do at Amazon.
At Amazon Alexa, yes. Hi everyone. My name is Max Amordeluso. I am the EU lead evangelist for Alexa. So I have the privilege of speaking about Alexa every day of the week with anybody who wants to listen anywhere in Europe. So that's my job description.
Great.
Hi, I'm David Lowe. I'm the head of solutions architecture for Alexa in the EU. So my job is to work with people like Bob and many others to help them build skills to the highest standards every day.
And hi, my name is Bob Harris. I've been around technology probably for about 40 years now, and working with Amazon in the last few years, and recently started a company called Veneloqui, which is focusing on developing Alexa skills.
Can you just say a little bit about what you did with AWS before you got into the voice design area, Bob? Maybe some of the stuff that you did when you were working back in TV. It's kind of interesting, I think, for the viewers to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. For my sins, I've been working around AWS now for, it'll be 10 years this year, come November. We adopted it at Channel 4 in where I was CTO in 2008. And pretty much moved most of our infrastructure, in that direction. So I think it's fair to say I was a reasonably early adopter of the platform. And the fact I'm here today working on Alexa shows that I continue to track what you guys at AWS are doing.
Great. If you're watching us internationally, it's probably worthwhile saying that Channel 4 is the UK's second state broadcaster. It's generally known as an innovator in broadcast, and it's one of the first TV providers in the UK to have a video on demand service. So it's that kind of project that Bob worked with us on in the early days. We really appreciate him being a champion for AWS from the beginning here in the UK. It's been really helpful for us.
And
so
now a champion for Alexa.
Champion for Alexa. Yeah,
and we're super happy about that.
I'm going to turn it over to Max now, who's going to ask a few questions about what you're doing with the voice platform, Bob. So
yeah, absolutely. So let's start from this. What do you like about developing for Alexa? Why are you so interested in developing for Alexa?
Okay, I started developing on Alexa because been tracking new technology or emerging technologies for a long time now, and when the voice thing started happening and Alexa was out there, I got very, very excited about that commoditization of voice. You made it possible to do things with Alexa that have been really difficult or very expensive to do. As I said, I've been working around AWS for a long time, and along the way, a few things become very obvious. You guys like developers. You make it really easy for developers to pick up the platform, and when I say easy, I just don't mean that from a cost point of view, because cost is important when you're a small, startup, as it were. But you also make it easy because folks like you guys, who are the evangelists, when we've got problems, we can come to AWS and get answers to those problems. The platform is evolving quickly. There are SDKs, there are tools, there's a huge amount of documentation, and of course there's an emerging ecosystem, supporting all this outside. One of the things we've just done is started the Cambridge Alexa Developers Meetup, and David came and talked at our opening one last month. So you're there to support us doing those things. So it's not just about AWS, it's about that huge community that sits around AWS. It's just frictionless.
You guys have been working on skills for a while. You cooperated on a few things, on a few events, on a few meetups. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Dave?
So my own journey with Alexa is similar. So I came from Skyscanner, which is another big AWS client in the UK, one of the biggest, I think. And we were tight with Amazon AWS, the App Store, and we were introduced to Alexa quite early, but we really believed in reducing the friction of finding travel and trying to get people from the mobile apps, which I used to run, where you were minimum 45 taps from A to Z to find what you wanted, to one simple phrase, I need a flight from here to there tomorrow afternoon for less than £100. And we totally believed, and Skyscanner still does, that that is the way forward to reduce friction. And over time, I think I was the first person in the UK to do a public demonstration of that Alexa skill at an App Store Summit 3 years ago or so, and got into the community and went out to speak on behalf of Amazon, then came to work in the role Max is doing now. Bob and I met around a year ago at one of these events where Bob accosted me at some point to say, when are we going to have an API for developers to make skills easier to build? We've got the console and we love it, but an API would be better. And Bob can fill in the details on what happened next.
Yeah, credit where credit's due. I think, I don't know, 3 months later, you know, what did Amazon announce for the Alexa space? An API that let us both publish skills interactively, but also, you know, automate the pipeline for publishing and building skills. So actually, with some of our skills, we do sort of a batch overnight rebuild of them to bring new data in, etc. So again, it comes back to that point about working with Amazon. It's a constantly evolving platform. You're listening to what the developers are asking, what the developer community is asking out there, and you know, not everything arrives when we want it, but a lot of it does arrive.
Good. That's great to hear, because that's one of the reasons we do this. So, can you share with us some of the things that you've done with Alexa skills? I know that under brand Accelerate, you have a few skills that have been doing quite well.
Yeah, so just to explain a little bit, you know, as I said, I got hugely excited when voice tech started commoditizing. The reason I'm excited about it is because, and I'm sort of on record as saying this, I think it's going to be the future of social, or it's going to play a huge part in social care in this country going forward. And I could talk for an hour on that without pausing, and I won't. But, so what we're interested in doing is designing and building skills that are going to go into that social care space. However, to do that, you've got to develop skills which I always say are long-running, are robust, and are multi-turn. A lot of the skills out there today are what we call single shot. You know, Alexa, what's the weather going to be? You know, Alexa comes back with, you're going to need an umbrella.
Hot and sunny if you're in London right now.
Exactly.
Otherwise it's raining.
Or why don't you just open the window and find out? We're talking about skills which run for minutes or even hours.
Yep.
Some of our testing, we're in a conversation with Alexa for well over an hour. So we zeroed in on quizzes. Not because we love quizzes, but for a quiz to work, it's got to be robust, it's got to work on multi-turn, it's got to accept any form of input, including people coughing, going to sleep. It's got to wake up in the right place when you come back. It's got to start off from where it left off. And our ones are really friendly, and they even ask you your name and address you by their name. The reason we're doing those quizzes isn't because, as I say, we love quizzes. We've got a bit of right applications. You think about some of the age groups we're looking at. We're not just talking about, we're talking about people who perhaps have never even learned some of these interfaces. They're not going to answer in that crisp 8 seconds that you have to do on Alexa at the moment.
And you also, your Christmas-related skills actually got you pretty popular because they were used a lot.
Yeah, after writing, I'm a space geek, so my original quiz under the Voxcelerate brand was called Apollo Quiz. And I think I got a free Echo Dot that month, but we only got about 150 users. And then my colleague, Rich Merritt, took the framework and put out a Christmas movie quiz and a Christmas music quiz. And the next thing I know, you guys sent us money. And that's the
absolutely.
Alexa Rewards program, which Dave and you can talk about far better than I. But again, it comes back to that support for developers. We were somewhere up as sort of, we were on the top rail of skills for Christmas, and we actually got rewarded for that. That isn't our personal aim is not to go out and sort of generate those rewards, but when you do, it's really nice.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear.
So anytime you want to send us money, feel free.
That's for sure. So that the Developers Rewards is a program that we do have within Alexa that rewards monetarily developers of the most engaging skills that we do have on specific markets. There is 8 categories, and recently we also had we added the kids skills. So we do have a lot of skills, and the most engaging, the most popular skills are actually going to get money from Amazon.
And we just want people to build skills that customers love, and that's the whole point of doing it. So we don't want people to go out as developers and think, I'm in this for the money, but we want them to have a reward for doing things that work. And when people use the skills and when they review the skills well and when they come back and they use them more, that's the sort of behavior we really want to reward. So it's not really about the money, but it's a reward for people being engaged and doing things the way we think our customers want to see.
Right, it's not all about the money, of course, but money is important as well for some developers, right? So we have created also around in the US, for example, a couple of days ago, we launched the in-skill purchasing. So this is part of the monetization program. It's something that I think there's going to be a game changer. So this is going to be the possibility for developers of making money in skills while their users are using something. So think about unlocking new levels in a game or new artifacts or premium content, this sort of things. So you can build actually and get paid for that experience, a premium experience, in a very similar way that we've been doing for app stores, for example, and so on. So
that's right. I mean, if you look at the history of mobile apps and app stores, the real progression of apps and games especially happen when you can monetize them. And when people could do in-app purchases and when they could do premium purchases as well. And if you look at the Mac App Store, the things that sell are high-end at 99 or 150 pounds for a genuine, a skill that helps you to make your day easier. It's not just 99 pence purchases in games. So we think it is a game changer, but it's something people have been asking for because they want to be able to do more and justify themselves doing more. So we hear that, and we've started to do things about it.
There's a couple of questions from the stream which are on the intersect of Alexa and the Echo and AWS. One of them is about infrastructure automation in AWS using Alexa. And of course that is possible to do. When you run the backend for an Alexa skill inside AWS Lambda, those skills can inherit IAM roles and permissions. And by taking on those IAM roles and permissions, your Alexa skills can manipulate AWS resources within the policy framework that you're probably familiar with as an AWS developer. So there are lots of customers that have got both, I'd say, toy examples of that being used, but also production examples of it being used in the real world for things like checking in on infrastructure metrics or even doing deploys or roll forwards and roll backs of their infrastructure using voice by using a CloudFormation and other services. And then there's another couple of interesting questions here about Alexa in business, in the corporate world. And if you didn't know, AWS announced something at reInvent last year called Alexa for Business, which is a specific set of enhancements to the Alexa platform for deploying Alexa inside large-scale or corporate environments. It's been used both in hospitality environments to deploy Amazon Echoes at scale inside hotels and resorts, where you can do things like walk into a hotel room and say, Alexa, turn on the lights, or open the drapes and have the curtains of your suite open.
Yeah,
if you go to Vegas and stay in the Wynn, you might actually see that.
I actually have seen the Wynn suite. Oh, that suite is insanely good.
It's brilliant, as well as Echo in business for things like what's next in my calendar, or open my conference call, and having the skill platform in Alexa for Business control Cisco and other voice conferencing equipment. So there's a lot of features there. If you're interested in all that stuff, then check out Alexa for Business. Available in the US right now, but I'm sure it will come to other regions like all AWS services do, as and when there's demand for it. And that also enables private skills to answer Richard Pold, I think is the name of the user. Richard Pold's question. You can initiate creation of a private skill store there within Alexa for Business and establish skills that are only available to your organization or enterprise.
That's correct.
Using that platform. So that's a set of tools you might want to take a look at.
And that's something that we're particularly interested in. I was going to say that private skill, because some of our deployment use cases are into things like care homes.
Of course,
where again, the additional security, also the ability to know where the device is, therefore implicitly who owns the device. But as you say, the private skill feature was particularly interesting. We followed that very closely.
You can associate a device with a location, of course. So if you're in that kind of context and you say something like send help, you can enrich that with the specific device location and send someone to that specific place in a timely manner. So there's a lot of value in the location awareness within the device in that kind of context, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was in a hotel in Sweden 3 years ago where they had Echoes in every room, and it wasn't a big hotel, so it wasn't a big deployment for them, but you could say, ask room service to send me a beer. and they'd mapped the Echo device IDs themselves to the billing system. But of course, because
And
it
how many
wasn't
times did you have to test that, David?
Somebody had to. Somebody had
moving
to
on.
test it.
Did it understand you at the end of it?
It did. It understood me very well, all the way through.
It worked.
The thing was, because it wasn't Alexa for Business at the time, people logged them out and used the Echoes with their own accounts, then realised the skills didn't work.
Yep.
So although it was innovative and a good thing to try, it had its drawbacks.
Yeah, you need
so
a control framework.
AWS
right,
for Business completely solved that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is something else that AWS Alexa for Business actually does, and it enables central management of shared devices fleet. So you do have one location. Think about a corporation that has a lot of devices in all the desks, in all the meeting rooms, and so on, or a hospitality setting. Like, as you say, the one Echo device in every room. So you start having like infrastructure churn here.
Or you have
just
deployment
without.
challenges if you've got 5,000 devises at 5 minutes per
There you go.
device.
And now you
That's
can
a
say
big
you have a
deployment
console.
overhead.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you guys
you can
can
centrally
create a
deploy.
pretty. Yeah, exactly. Just I wanted to go back to one thing you said earlier about AWS, using AWS for skills. I am a super big proponent. I wrote a blog post last year, and I strongly suggest every skill developer to use Lambda. But you don't have to.
No, of course.
You don't have
Of
to. I
course.
just want to make sure that was
You can
clear.
hit your own web service endpoint,
Exactly.
right?
As long as you have your backend, there is specs out there that you can certify. I mean, you can figure out what you have to maintain from a security point of view, but you can do it. You can use your own backend.
And you could inject credentials into that from something like AWS Secrets Manager as well, so you can merge
Absolutely.
these different services together in different ways depending on what you're building. Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great.
Cool. Do we have more questions from there? Oh,
Not from the stream,
Yeah,
but I know that you recently launched this SDK v2 on for the Node.js backend developer, right? So I think you might
Absolutely.
want to talk about that a little bit.
yes, sure. So, and we have here a big champion that is not Amazon, and I would like to hear from you, Bob. What do you think about the SDK2? How would it change your view on the overall thing, on the way what we did for developers?
I think it's a fantastic example of that evolution. And you've got to sort of remember sometimes that evolutions, well, maybe it's a little bit more moderate than a revolution. So just 30 seconds on, if you've been developing skills with SDK1, you sort of know that if you're an Alexa skills developer, you don't get given this huge lump of text that somebody said. The Alexa voice service breaks it down into what we call intents. You know, what do you want to do, and what do you want to do it to? So if I say, Alexa, buy me a pizza, the intent is buy, and the object is a pizza. Yeah, and the way SDK1 worked is that the lambdas, you talk about the lambdas at the back end, the lambda will have a function, maybe it's called buy intent, and that'll get fired. And it'll get fired by the incoming request, and then my code gets, it wakes up, says, oh, somebody wants to buy something, what do they want to buy? And I interrogate the session object, and I learn that it's a pizza, and away I go. That's sort of simple until I get into multi-state skills. So maybe you can buy when you've logged in, when you've logged out, when you haven't registered a payment. These are all different states in the skill, which means actually now I've got several instances of that instance. But again, you guys take, you handle all the routing of that, and it'll come to the appropriate one. But the point being, you make all the decisions about which intent gets fired. So just when you've learnt that, as an Alexa skill developer, with SDK1, you can forget it all. Like I said, it's not so much evil, it is revolutionary. Now, completely changed. When you write a skill now, you have a set of what we call, request handlers. They are in literally a list. The request object comes in with something called a handle intent object attached to it. And the code says to the first one, can you handle this? It's literally got a method called can handle. And it looks and decides whether or not it wants to handle this intent. Now, before, you didn't get any choice. Once you got invoked, you were handling it. Now, you can go, actually, I don't want to handle it. You just return a false, it drops through to the next one. So you go down this chain. The point being that when I get this handle intent object, I don't just get what the intent was, and I get what the intent was, I get the session object, I get the context object, I get all the attributes. I can even, if I can do it quick enough, call out to an external service to get additional input. So my ability to decide whether or not I want to, and by the way, one of those things I can test is the state. So now in a few lines in the can handle function, I can decide whether I want to handle this thing.
And you can make that decision
Yeah,
based on things like the session attributes that are passed to you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
on a huge number of things, including, as I said, making API calls out to somewhere else if you want to risk doing that in time. You finally drop down until one of them says, yeah, I can handle it. Returns true from the can handle, the handle object then gets called, it handles it, does a response. You've got to be into response objects. If you're still working with ask and tell, you haven't been working on show or spot, you may not be familiar with response objects. You have to get into response objects, fire the response objects and go. If nothing handles it, you fall through the bottom, and there's a chain of error handlers now, not just the classic old unhandled. I can now go down a similar chain of error handlers, say, well, what actually went wrong? How do I want to handle it? It's a radical change to the way SDK 1 works, but once you've been through it a couple of times and had a coffee and gone back and done it again, seriously better place. The net effect is better structured skills, fewer lines of code, less duplication, and we all know as coders, we hate duplicating blocks of code.
I love the way you describe it, so I could not have said it better. So the takeaway here is that if you're starting with skills today, start from the SDK 2. So
Absolutely.
definitely version 2. Look into it. It's extremely important, and it's something that we put a lot of work into it. A lot of people did, so it's glad to hear this. So I wanted to cover something that we just briefly touched earlier on the kids' skills. So this is a big thing. I have 3 kids, so it's a big favorite of my family, and it's a big topic. We recently launched in Europe as well the kids' skills. So the Alexa kids' skills are any voice experience that is created in Europe for 16 years and younger Alexa users. So we have a lot to develop. There is a lot of delightful experiences that can be created out there. Games, work, homework support, access to information, entertainment. There is, and actually, if you create the skills that get to be used by a lot of people, that is a category of the developers' rewards. So there is also rewards available to you for this as well. And it's look that up. It's called Alexa Skills for Kids. It's huge and it's very delightful. It gets you to create experiences shared by the whole family. It's pretty powerful. It's a safe, controlled environment on that one. So. Awesome. Good. Any other questions that are coming up through?
No, we're done on stream questions. Of course, if you have any questions that you want to submit, please do that in Twitch chat and we'll get to them. Is there anything else you want to cover as a team before we wrap up this segment? We need to give our next host a couple of minutes to get on, but
sure.
Is there anything else you want to cover?
So there is a lot actually that we could talk about, but I'll pick one thing. There is something that we recently launched in the US. Is that it gives you the possibility to measure and to get better and to actually get to understand what your users are, how your users are using the skill and where it's not working the way you're actually supposed to. So we put something called the intent to request history API that gets you, if your skill passes a certain threshold of usage, it gets you an anonymized number of utterances that are used. So the way that your users are using the skill, the way where things are failing, that enables you, if you're doing your job well, just to get metrics and to improve and to evolve your skill. A skill is not a finite a quantity, something that is static. It needs to evolve with the expectation of the users and the way that human beings actually use the skill.
Yeah, I've experienced that a lot with our chatbot service, Amazon Lex. I often say actually that no design ever survives first contact with a user, and it's definitely the case for chat-based interfaces. You can never anticipate precisely how users will try to interact with what you've built.
Absolutely.
So that kind of intelligence sounds really useful.
So super important actually to measure and reiterate.
But to go back to the point we made at the start, when Bob was asking me about the API a year ago, most people were asking for analytics.
Yeah.
It was the number one thing people used to say, and we had some developers that we had good examples of using to like Google Analytics, to be honest, and hardwired analytics into DynamoDB and other ways just to try and treat their skills more like a funnel, which you would do with any other product, but they hadn't really got to that point yet. So this is a big change for people to be able to, not instantly, but get a regular check on where people are falling out, what things aren't being said, what things aren't being understood. If anything was helping developers now, that'll be it, to really understand.
You make lots of assumptions about what the user's going to do, and I know from our skills, we ask people to say, my answer is, followed by answer. 44% of people just give us the answer. It's 44 because they just give us the answer. Now, it works, we recover from it, but it does make you wonder whether you bother asking, so let's streamline the skill. Let's take out that, please say my answer is. Just let them answer, it's what they want. I don't normally, when I ask somebody a question, I don't tell them the format that they're allowed to give me the answer in.
Yep.
People used to do this to me in the Skyscanner skill when I built it all back in the day. We had no SDK back then, by the way, so we had to do everything ourselves. But every time you would say something like, when are you traveling? They would say, Moscow. And you've got to validate that yourself. So the SDK2 has handled a lot of that because can handle that, takes away a whole layer of validation. But you still had to log that somewhere and act on the fact that somebody didn't understand what you asked them. Yeah. So that's exactly what we're trying to get to.
Right. So there's the question here from Game Persona 20. This is an interesting question. The question they asked is, why must the user say Alexa? So it's about the wake word on the hardware platform, really. Can you describe why the wake word exists in the platform?
Oh, absolutely. It's a super important question. So the wake word is one of the several layers of privacy that we built in with these devices. So we wanted to make sure that a user had control of when Alexa streams up to the cloud the actual words or whatever, right? Yeah. So the wake word detector is the first layer of this, and by saying Alexa, you signal to the device that you want to interact with the voice service. But you can also change, as a matter of fact, that keyword. You can use Echo, Amazon, or my favorite, which is computer. But the point is that Alexa interact and will stream up only when it catches that keyword. There is a keyword detector that actually listens only for that word.
Yeah. Now you can bypass that if you use the Alexa voice service natively and don't use the Echo platform, right? You could write something yourself which captures audio more freely, but it wouldn't be as secure and it wouldn't have the privacy assurance that we
Amazon
have
Echo devices
with the Amazon Echo device.
With the wake word.
That's why that is there. So it is a design decision. You can work around it, but not on the Echo platform, not on the Amazon platform.
And I have used, I've put AWS onto Raspberry Pis with Matrix 1 microphone arrays, and as you say, you get the ability to do the custom wake word there. But the other reason we're doing that is we're looking at going beyond wake words to the concept of wake events. Somebody rings your doorbell and Alexa says, Ian, so-and-so's at the door, because I've used recognition to recognize who it is. And more importantly, again, when you think about looking after people living alone, I can perhaps warn you not to answer the door.
Yeah.
So we can string these things together.
Great. Awesome. Excellent. And with that, we're going to wrap up this segment and give our next hosts a couple of minutes to prep. So thanks for joining us and the Alexa team, and Bob, of course. Great to see you again.
Thank you very much.
Here at the AWS Launchpad at the AWS Summit here in London. We will be back in just a couple of minutes, so stay with us. Thank you.